We're working to slow the spread of this virus. We're taking steps to support you through tough times. There is nothing we won't do to keep you safe and to protect your health.
The Prime Minister addressed Canadians for the fourth day in a row, calling again on people to stay home and try to reassure them that the government will be there to help. But in these extraordinary times, do we need to see more extraordinary measures? How is Ottawa managing the crisis so far? It's Thursday, and I'm here with At Issue, but we are doing our part with social distancing. Chantal Hébert is still in Montreal, but not in the studio. Andrew Coyne is still in Toronto, but again, not in the studio. Thank you both. I appreciate you doing that. Obviously, things have changed pretty quickly and dramatically since we last talked, and the government has ramped up its response, both in terms of a public health response and an economic response. Andrew, maybe I'll just start with you in terms of your assessment of how the government is managing this.
Well, you could say they're late with this, and they would be in company with virtually every other government on earth. Everybody's been disarmed by how rapidly this thing has grown. I think everybody was a little bit behind the curve, maybe with some exceptions in the public health community. But short of them, it's hard to criticize, because I certainly didn't see the necessity for as much as they've now finding they're having to do, as you say, both on the public health front and on the economic front, and of course in terms of closing the border. These are extraordinary measures that they are improvising on the fly in the space of a few days. I think you would now say they have more or less caught up with the gravity of the situation.
Chantal, I'll get you to weigh in on how you think the government is doing.
I think on a number of fronts, the government has done the best it could, and what any other government would have tried to do. To close the border by common assent with a partner who is at best unpredictable like Donald Trump has to be a plus, and it's being done in as orderly a manner as one can imagine. This is the longest border in the world, and between two countries that are intertwined in so many ways. Federal, provincial, it's been a strength of this government that it has managed to build coalitions when dealing with big issues. Mm-hmm. Think of renegotiating NAFTA that crossed party lines. And by and large, the federal government and the premiers, although they usually don't agree on a lot of things, are speaking with one voice. And as far as I can tell, so are the opposition parties in the House of Commons, but also in the provinces. So there are no miracle cures to this, and there are no easy answers. But I think most Canadians would take comfort from the fact that their political class has found a way to speak more or less with one voice.
Andrew, can I get you to weigh in on the border there? I was told yesterday that it took sort of from start to finish, although they still had details and are still working on details now, about 22 hours to get the Americans on board with this idea. I mean, Chantal's right, that's fairly extraordinary when you consider who we are dealing with.
Closing the border on its own, of course, was never going to be the solution that some people thought it was. It was only ever going to be a contributor because unless you're controlling, as we now know, the rate of transmission within our borders, then simply closing to outsiders was not going to help at all. Mm-hmm. And all of these measures, to some extent, depended on public opinion also moving. I don't think you could have enacted, even though it would like government to have done things much sooner, you've got to have one eye on what the public opinion would be ready to do, and the kind of draconian measures that we're now all subjected to, including the way we're broadcasting this show. I don't think it would have been able to get the constituency for it 2 weeks ago.
That's a good point. You have to build up sort of that ability to do that within the population. Just a last point to both of you on the Prime Minister, making it a point to come out every day. Today he didn't even have, a particular message. It was really to repeat messages to make sure people understood things, and I guess to reassure people. How do you think he's doing, Chantal?
I think it's important that he does that. It would be important that he had a clear message every day and not just cheerleading. And I think the template for showing up every day, which is easier to implement at the provincial level because you have many more things you can talk about, is being set here in Quebec by François Legault, who's been doing it very successfully. But don't forget, this template in this province comes from the ice storm and Lucien Bouchard's way of showing up every day with practical details. I think it's harder for the federal government to have a new practical message every day. So the Prime Minister is going to have to be careful not just to have people come out and sound like he's got nothing to say.
Andrew.
This really challenges all political leaders. You certainly have to smarten up in a hurry and put traditional politics aside. People are badly frightened by this, and they're looking, as they do in time of crisis, to people in positions of leadership to reassure them, to show them the way forward. It's a shame that I think Trudeau, by the time of this crisis, was a diminished figure in Canadian politics, didn't have the kind of stature he would have had 2 or 3 years ago. But perhaps we'll see that his performance in the crisis may lead people to rally around him. Traditionally, people do tend to rally around leaders in times like this, and we'll see whether that happens here.
Okay, well, I'm just reassured that I get to see you on Thursdays. That helps me get through that things are sort of normal still. Thank you both. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast, for extra content. This week, we're going to continue talking about really the only story out there, but in this case, the role of the opposition parties in the time of a pandemic. Look for it on any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational.